I just want to convey something real quick before we get into this episode. There's been a lot of talk in the news, not as much as I think there should be, of human trafficking. So there's an event that's coming up, like I said, on August 12th at the Marriott Shoals Conference Center in Florence, Alabama. It's the second annual Fight for Freedom benefit for Holos Hope. Holos Hope is a nonprofit organization in Florence whose mission is to provide hope and healing to women who have lived through human trafficking and addiction. It empowers them to find their purpose and live in freedom. They support women on their journey to emotional, physical, and spiritual wholeness by providing safe housing, therapy, employment, and more. Holos Hope is currently supporting 4 survivors. All proceeds from the Fight for Freedom benefit will go towards funding the Holos Hope 2-year residential program. Rebecca Bender, who will be speaking at this event, is a survivor of trafficking and is the CEO and founder of Elevate Academy. Kaylee McEnany will be the keynote speaker. She's the former White House press secretary and current co-host of Outnumbered on Fox. Again, if you're interested in attending this event, it's on August 12th at 7 p.m. at the Marriott Conference Center in Florence, Alabama. You can purchase your tickets on their website, holoshope.org. That's HOLOS, hope.org. They're still looking for another business sponsor, so if you're able to fill that role, I'd encourage you to do so. If you're not able to attend this event, but you would like to support them, please consider making a donation. They're always grateful for volunteers, and they have a shopping list as well. We will put more information down in the description. Thank you, and let's help end human trafficking.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mish Men podcast. Today, you're here with me, Dustin Labar, and to my immediate and direct left, Mr. Adam Mauser.
How do you do?
I hope everybody's doing okay today. Hope you enjoyed the last episode. As always, I don't want you guys to forget, but Charlie Mike
Never weaken.
Charlie Mike Never Weaken. We got our t-shirts on today. They're one of our favorite companies, a sponsor, a friend of the podcast. For any and all of your t-shirt needs, you need to go to them. You can check them out on Instagram. You can find you can go directly to their website through our link tree on our Instagram, if that's easier for you guys. And it'll actually bring you right to our shirt. They have Mish Men shirts.
Those are great, by the way.
The Mish Men shirts?
Oh, yeah.
They're fantastic. They're super comfy, form-fitting. They make you look like however you want to look. Like if you wanted more muscles, they help you with more muscles.
Yeah. I weigh like 110 pounds.
Yeah, but it looks like you're a jacked 240.
At least.
Yeah. So, but they also have RFTB Studios t-shirts. They have Reaching for the Bars podcast t-shirts, and they have a bunch of other cool t-shirts that they can do. You've seen some of the ones that I've been wearing recently. So they should be your first stop or any of your t-shirt needs.
And if you doubt, if you're just like, I wonder if they would really do this, just reach out to Charlie Mike Never Weaken and ask the question. I mean, the worst they can say is no.
And typically they're pretty good about getting your t-shirts done, even if it's a special order, and they do it very quickly.
Yeah.
So today, this is something that's very topical and probably pretty easy for us to talk about because we do it. But I do have some questions to ask about it. So the CrossFit Games are upon us.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you that are listening, you may have heard of the fitness regiment that we do called CrossFit.
Is that a cult?
That's a loaded question.
I say no, but
I would say no, but I bet some gyms are more culty than other gyms.
Oh yeah.
So as a whole, I would say no, but that there's probably some gyms that are more cultier than others.
I stayed away from it just because it seemed kind of like. But once you start doing it, you're like, it's not a cult. It's just like a bunch of people that have a sense of community, and that's what keeps you coming back.
Yeah, that's right. It is a sense of community. So we do CrossFit, and we do the workout every day, but the top level athletes go to something called the CrossFit Games. So you may be wondering how you get there. So there's the CrossFit Open that you do, I do. Everybody can do it.
Right.
Even if you've never done CrossFit before, you can go to a CrossFit gym and sign up and do it. It's online.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. Good community, depending on your gym. It gets pretty hype. And
you can track your results over years.
Correct. So actually the app does a really good job of showing you how far you've come. You can download the app and it shows you how far you've risen. So if you're good in the open, so anybody can sign up. It's online. They post the workouts. It's 3 weeks. The top 10, I'm not going to speak to everything, but just in the open sense, the top 10% of athletes from each region get to do an online qualifier called quarterfinals.
And how big's a region? Or how many regions are there?
I don't know off the top of my head how many regions there are. There's obviously the most amount of regions is in America.
Right.
And then you have like Australia's its own, like Canada and part of the northern United States are one. And then you have like the Southeast in America. And then like Europe has maybe one or two. Mm-hmm. But it's obviously, there's more peak CrossFit started in America, so the bulk of it's here, but it's also expanding very rapidly. So there's plenty of other regions in the world. So if you make top 10%, you get to do an online quarterfinals. And then I think in your region, the top 120 in your region make it to semifinals.
Okay.
And then they're separated among the regions.
And there's another competition after the local, then the regional, and then
then the semis,
right?
Open and quarters are both online.
Right.
And then you actually travel to go to semifinals, wherever your semifinals is. Then depending on your location, they take a certain number of people from your region that finish, somewhere between maybe 2 finishing spaces to 5 or 6 finishing spaces, depending on how big your region is. And those people go to the CrossFit Games. So it ends up being like 40 to 60 people, I forget now off the top of my head, that go to the CrossFit Games. They go, right now it's in Madison, Wisconsin, and they go there every year to compete. So that brings me to my first question.
Well,
go ahead.
They almost moved to Birmingham.
They were pretty close. They were pretty close. I think it's when all that switching started to happen.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I think that was when all that switching started to happen, and then they were like, we'll just stick it out here for another year.
Which is too bad, because that would have been close enough to drive down.
It would have been a nightmare for all of us. We would have been going crazy there. Yeah, it would have been, but it would have been fun.
Yeah,
it would have been fun.
All right, sorry, I cut you off.
So my first question is, do you consider? So obviously the games is trying to compete. It's like a sporting event.
Yeah,
like with the NFL or something. Do you consider it to be a sport inherently, like CrossFit as the sport?
I do. It's got some more maturing to do.
Yeah.
At the elite level.
Right.
But I do not because they have this arranged CrossFit Open thing in order to get to the elite athletes competing. But it's there are events that you can compete in, that athletes compete in, and they're pretty much standardized. Now it's kind of difficult sometimes with the judging, and I think that's where the maturing comes in, because right now the judging seems to be, let me say this, I work out at a CrossFit gym. I enjoy it, but I don't enjoy the sport enough I don't get into it. If I happen to come across it, I will watch the games on TV.
Yeah.
But I don't
search it out.
I don't seek it out now.
Yeah.
But it is exciting to watch, but I've noticed it's hard to determine what the real judging criteria are sometimes.
Correct.
From athlete to athlete. And I know that's frustrating for the athletes.
Yeah, so that's a good jump off point. So part of the reason why I'll say I guess it's a sport, however, professionally it's not there yet. And here, if you've never seen the games, they basically take volunteers as your judges.
Yeah.
Or as if you're not sure what it is, it would be like your ref. They take volunteers.
Yeah.
So if you the criteria is like you have to judge a certain amount of people in the open, and then maybe you go to quarterfinals and judge, or semifinals, and then you can go to the games and judge. But really, these people are just normal.
It could be me.
Could be you, and you could just go there. So it's really difficult when you have an unpaid labor force that's just volunteering to really crack down on them to make sure that they're better, or they follow a specific standard. Standardize. Because you'll watch, for me, I've been doing it a long time, so maybe I scrutinize a little bit more.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
But you watch and you're like, well, this person is getting away with basically whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And this one judge who's trying to prove a point is like, I'm not letting anything get by.
Right.
And then you have the thing like, if you're a CrossFit athlete, you may be in awe of the person you're judging. Like, oh, I can't believe I'm judging. And you're just letting them get away with murder because you're like, I'm not going to no rep X, Y, and Z person. So that's like a huge hurdle. I think they need to solve that probably first. Excuse me. That's like a big deal to not have any kind of standardized judging.
That excessive professional courtesy, because there's this guy that you've looked up to for years, and now all of a sudden you find yourself grading his chest to bar pull-ups.
Exactly, and you're like, I can't even say anything. It's too amazing. I think that's hurdle number one. Hurdle number.
Let me say something on that.
Go ahead.
Not all officiating, whether it's NBA, when you're talking the top tier. As George Carlin would put it, the only 3 sports are baseball, basketball, and football.
Right.
All the others are games or activities.
Yeah.
But that aside, those are probably, they have the most mature officiating, but even they struggle with
Sure.
standardized calls. So everyone's going to struggle with that because
Yeah.
you have a human in the loop.
That's correct.
And I there's a propensity lately to use like cameras and AI and all this other stuff to try to sanitize the judging and make it less.
Yeah.
I think that's trouble. I think you should always rely on a person to make a
that's
judgment
right.
call.
That's right.
But anyway,
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. You're right. The next hurdle, which now I'm blanking on what my next hurdle was. So we have our judging. Then we have So if you turn on a football game, like even if you're not a football player, it's kind of clear who's on offense, who's on defense. Like somebody's trying to do something. The scoring makes sense.
yeah.
You know, it's this kind of thing. They haven't figured out how to make it viewer friendly so that if somebody clicked on it and didn't know what was going, even me, who knows what's going on, sometimes I don't know what's going on because if the cameraman focuses on one person for too long and then pans out, you don't know who's done anything. So you're just like, I don't know who's in the lead or who's not.
Right.
They tried for a while to have a scoring ticker. Do you remember that? It was a scoring. So it was a scoring ticker they would put up, like it was like counting reps, but it was so wrong all the time that they just took it away.
Yeah.
So it'd be like this person's this person's in the lead. They have 100 reps, and all of a sudden, a person in last place they jumped in the front, and it's like, oh, now this person's in first place, and you don't have any idea. So it's really difficult to get people that don't do CrossFit to watch CrossFit as like a sport.
That's fair. That's completely fair.
And I think
I'm Exhibit A on that. Yeah. I do it, and I'm still just.
So I mean, we watch it. And, but we really know what's going on. We really have a good idea what's going on. We kind of have competed before. We know what's going on, but you're not going to get just like a casual person. Like, let me throw on some sports.
Yeah.
Cause it's just like, it's not a nightmare. Like it's a nightmare to watch that cause you don't really know what's going on. So that is a big hurdle, in terms of the CrossFit Games.
Agreed.
Here's my big pet peeve. So this is probably not going to be well received, but it's my big pet peeve. Just like you said, CrossFit as a sport or some kind of league is in its infancy, correct?
Yeah.
So I think part of the problem is a lot of the athletes that are top tier are like, because you hear these, I don't know if you've heard a lot of the stuff they're complaining about their pay and they don't like how much money they make and they have all these things because they don't.
I have heard a little
jobs.
bit of whining about that.
Well, they're skipping to they've picked a sport that's new and they're trying to skip all that hard work.
Yeah.
Like your forefathers have to do,
right?
Like the originators of the sport. So like in the 60s, if you played in the NFL, you played your season, and then you went home back to the factory and you worked the rest of the year,
right?
Because it wasn't enough money.
Because you had to pay the bills.
Yeah. So those guys, they did it because they loved it, and then they made a little bit of money, and then those were the guys that paved the way for these $1 million contracts.
Right. Same thing with baseball.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. I think any sport is like that because it starts out and it's just people are doing it for the love of the game. And then they paved the way. So part of the pet peeve is it's hard to relate to these guys because you're like looking at them and you're like, you don't have a job or anything. Yeah. You're just like hanging out.
Other than you might be part owner of a gym, and you're really just the draw to the gym.
Right. Or you got a couple sponsors, but then you'll have people, it's this weird thing where they're like, they ask for help. They want all this stuff. And they're like, well, I don't really want to have to go to work. I need to be able to train 3 times a day. And I just am like, so it's hard to connect to those people.
Yeah.
It's not hard. I'm not trying to connect with the NFL player, but I get it. Like they're in a sport that's well established. So these guys are incredibly gifted athletes. So they get to skip the queue in terms of like making money in a job, and they get to jump right. Like an NFL player gets drafted out of college and then makes $10 million. I get it. I understand. But that's because the way has been paved. So I don't know how you feel specifically about that. It's one of my big pet peeves.
So let me ask you this related to that. So the driver for the pay, the reason the pro football players and the Major League Baseball, the main sports, hockey too, the reason they get that pay is because we are willing to buy a ticket and go watch the game.
Correct.
And there's a whole season of games.
Right.
And there's paraphernalia that I can buy associated with the team.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff feeds into what they can make, what they can demand through their agent as a salary. Now, you've got the CrossFit Open Games, and you got other competitions.
Yeah.
But how many people are other than a bunch of CrossFit enthusiasts like you and me?
Yeah.
Are going pay to watch games?
Yeah. I mean,
ticket sales.
Like I wouldn't pay to watch it. Like, okay, so here's a perfect example. The NFL Sunday Ticket.
Yeah.
is, hundreds of dollars. You get to watch all the games. Would you pay $100 to watch the CrossFit Games on TV?
I don't even pay to watch football.
I wouldn't watch it either.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it either.
I'm a cheapskate.
And I'll spend the money, but I love CrossFit. I pay for it every month, but it would be really tough for them to be like, okay, now you have to pay to watch. I'd be like, get out of here with that.
Yeah.
But just like you said, I think this is another thing is football or basketball. They're like family legacies. Like people grow up,
right?
And you're like, I'm a Packers fan, or we're gonna win. Like our team's gonna win. Like we're gonna win. It's like this big thing, and I don't know that they're. The reason I bring it up is because I've heard a couple athletes. Me and Mabry got into it about one. Like one guy went and he was like, "This is we need to unionize." I only made $2,000 last year at the games. So my response was, "I'm not making you do it.
Yeah,
like go get another job. Like if you're not happy with the money, go get a job and do this as part time, and then when you get good enough to win the $350,000 prize or $500,000 prize, then you don't have to work anymore."
That'd be like you and me complaining that we're not getting paid enough as podcasters.
Yeah. And then we're going to stand up against the man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I demand more pay from viewers.
Yeah, that's
laughable. I can't even say it without.
You guys need to pay us.
Bloviate on whatever.
I mean, I just think that's like, you have to think about this. The UFC has been around far longer.
Yeah, agreed.
The games specifically, like competition, they are a way bigger draw. Like UFC pay-per-views, I mean, they sell million pay-per-views.
Yeah. Plus they fill those arenas.
I mean, and it's still a new sport. It's still relatively new. So the fighters don't get paid very much. So these guys, and they basically keep their mouth shut until they get to the big time, and then they'll start asking for more money. But some of these guys will be like, you may only fight twice a year. And then if you're in the UFC, then maybe you get $10,000 to show and $10,000 to win. So $20,000. And you may be like, for one night, that's pretty good. But he may only have 2 nights of work that whole year.
Right.
And then he has to pay his trainers. He has to pay all these other bills. So it whittles down to nothing.
The doctor's bills.
Inevitably the doctor's bills. Yeah. So like, and those guys are kind of but it's a hard-nosed sport. Like I think CrossFit's more of like, like it's like, oh, look at my new Noble.
It's not nearly as demanding as MMA.
So, when I hear that, like I support these guys that are like on the forefront of CrossFit, and in 10 years they can be like, I'm the one that started that. Yeah. But you don't get to skip. You don't get to jump that hard part because you see the other athletes in other sports that are like, oh, well, they don't have to work. Well, yeah, I hear you. I hear that they don't have to work.
You got to get a fan base.
But you have to get a fan base.
That's what it is.
And it can't be just the fan base that does CrossFit. You have to get people outside of it to do it, like to watch it.
You might be talking about this later, but because the individual sports it's hard to follow the scoring.
Yeah.
And because the events it's amazing to watch these athletes do what they do.
Sure.
Even if you've never picked up a barbell ever in your life or tried to do a chin up or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to watch them out there, it's amazing to watch because they're like world-class athletes without a doubt. But it's hard to relate to when they're competing because it's kind of a long drawn out thing.
Right.
So it's hard to relate. Whereas football, you see the one team pushing the others back and they score. And in baseball, you see a big home run. You see scoring in basketball and hockey, et cetera. So do you think they're going to retool some of the events to widen that audience?
I think my first initial thought, and this is, we can talk about this. I think it's served better as a team sport. I think it's easier to understand.
Yeah.
Like people working together, you can see teams move. Like I think it's harder to watch as an individual sport. I like watching the team side of it if done correctly.
Would that include also doing a team event to where they gotta move these Atlas stones and jump leapfrog fashion?
Yeah.
A mile or something.
I mean, I think
I'm just making stuff up now.
I think there's a way to, like whoever's programming or whoever's laying out the games, they have to figure out how to make it viewer friendly. So that's individual or team, right? Like, so like it's easy to watch one of the events. You guys can look this up and watch some of the events, but some of the events, they may do something and then move an object forward. And that dictates what round they're on. Those are very easy to follow.
Oh yeah.
Because you're like, oh, that person has
tangible.
Their thing is farther than the other people's thing. So they're farther ahead. That's really easy to understand. That's viewer friendly. But when you have workouts that are like right next to, like they don't move anywhere or move any objects, that's really difficult to follow. So it's like pretty much just a wash of an event for spectators.
You know, two things came to mind when you were talking about that team event. One, a very slightly more mature strength type thing is a strongman competition.
Yep.
And people will watch that because they're like lifting heavy things.
Yes.
And they're moving an airplane, whatever, and they're competing one against the other. But there was a show back in the late 70s. It was Battle of the Network Stars. And they would have these stupid, they'd be arranged in like three teams.
Okay.
And it would be like people, like they get star of Kojak, and you see other TV stars from comedies and movie stars and that sort of thing. And they're all in this silly show. Mm-hmm. But it was a team sport, and it was something interesting to watch because it was somebody outside their element. So I'm not saying that we do this with CrossFit.
Yeah.
But if you have that team sport, and so you have even if they're relay races, it's something that is exciting and you can pull for your team.
Right. That's a good point. That's part of the reason why I think that the team thing makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to eliminate the individuals. I just think that the way that CrossFit's set up right now is like the thing they make the biggest deal about is the individuals. The teams are almost like a secondary thought
to draw an audience.
Yeah, and then the masters and all the other things that are going on that are great for people to do.
Yeah.
But I think that they have to and they're announcing. That was my next point. If you've listened,
I've heard you discuss it.
I mean, we offered. Reaching for the Bar said we will come out and do all your announcing, which I think we could, even if everybody was like, these guys are the worst, we're still better than the guys that are doing it right now. I've
listened to some of it, and it's difficult to fill dead space, and
for sure,
and to try to attract a new audience that might not normally be engaged.
Yeah,
you got to be on your toes, but they don't do a very good job.
They do not, and like it's pretty funny to listen to them sometimes because me and Laura will just sit in our ivory tower and just berate these guys. He'll like say something. It's like, if she wants to win, she's going to have to lift that faster than everybody else. And you're like, oh,
let me write that down.
Oh, is that a good way to win something? Is do something faster
lift
than
more.
somebody
It
else?
Sounds like someone's coaching. I've heard.
Yeah. Lift more and faster. Thanks, Mabry.
I wasn't going to name names.
But this was not just intentionally me saying to rag on CrossFit Games. So I'm going to transfer over to, now that I got all the issues, I still think there's a great path. I think it's fun. I think it brings the community together. I think people get excited around it's a series. So
especially the open.
The open. And then if you do have somebody at your gym, like we have Mary Helen, she goes to semifinals, everybody's like, everybody gets behind her.
Yeah, we get pumped.
T-shirts and everybody's super excited to see her. So it's like that raising up of a whole community when somebody goes.
She's out there training right now.
Yeah, and it helps if that person that you're rallying behind isn't like a jerk. So
I don't get behind jerks,
which happens sometimes.
Yeah,
I try not to get behind any jerks.
I don't. That's my policy.
I
didn't get that on a shirt.
I don't get behind any jerks, and you just keep standing in front of people you don't like.
Consider it done.
Consider it done. All right. So the first CrossFit Games, you know when it was? It's probably maybe earlier than you think.
This was a quiz. 1997?
No, you're 10 years off.
1987.
No, the other way.
2007.
Yes, that's correct. So CrossFit started before that, obviously.
Right.
So CrossFit started in 2001. That's when Greg Glassman put out his first thing or whatever he did. That weird guy.
That was a great model though that he developed.
I mean, he's crushed it. He's given branding seminars to Toyota.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because he said, you don't want, like, people say I am a CrossFitter. They don't say I do CrossFit most of the time.
Right.
I am a CrossFitter. So he's like, you want people to feel that way about the car that they're driving.
Right.
Like, I am Toyota.
He struck gold with this model.
I mean, he's crushed. Everybody, and there have been so many people that have tried. Functional fitness is not a new idea.
No.
People have been doing it forever.
And like lifting weights?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
That's old school. Come on.
And like, he took stuff that was already a thing. He didn't invent it, and he just put it together. He said it works better if you put it together, which other people have been trying to do.
And you have a model like, okay, if you're going to be part of my club, you got to pay some dues, and you got to have some sanctioned coaching,
right?
And it's a great model,
yeah,
and it's effective too.
And he said he was like the cream rise. So it's not a what do you call what McDonald's is a franchise?
Yeah,
it's not a franchise. They pay an affiliate fee.
Right.
So his view is you pay the affiliate fee to use CrossFit. That's fine. But then you can run your gym however you want. No building has to look the same. You don't have to run it anyway, and that the best gyms will always rise to the top.
Right.
Which I think is,
and you'll discover a new way to do it that's effective.
A pretty fair model.
Right. It's like a federalism model.
Yeah. So it's pretty good. So he invented this. People started getting super fit, seeing that it worked. And then Dave Castro,
familiar with him,
who's I guess his family's rich. He has this big farm in ranch in Aromas, California. He had the first CrossFit Games in June 30th and to July 1st, 2007. The interesting thing about this year is if you watch these, you're like, how has it gone this far this quickly? Because it's like a totally different thing. You're watching these guys and you're like, my God, what are they doing? I think it was, you could just sign up. So you could be like, I'm doing that, and just go out and compete. And I think it was like $500 first place prize. And then they had I think they maybe had 5 to 7 events. I mean, now there's 15 events through the whole weekend. So it's obviously grown that much. Then it finally went to a venue in California, like a big venue, and then it just started growing from there.
And then when did they start the qualification to get to?
So it used to be a little differently. Like I think in 10 and 11 or maybe 9, there was the open, and then there was sectionals, or maybe it was just sectionals. Like, so you went and competed somewhere in your section, whatever they had decided, and then they got rid of that and they went with the open and regionals. So regionals is very similar to semifinals, basically. And we used to love that model. It was pretty fun. It's a little different now, but it's still pretty fun. It's better than it was. Like when they changed it from regionals to this, I don't know if you remember, it was a nightmare. So you could qualify for the open, and then they were like, and here's 87 different ways you can qualify for the games. You could finish 4th or better at this competition. You could finish 3rd or better, but if
things
there's
are
somebody
weighted
here, it's like you were like, you couldn't follow. You didn't know who was making the games that year. You were like, I don't even know who's going because this one person took 3rd and they get to go, but this other person took 2nd in this one, but they don't get to go, but she's better than her or he's better than him. It was an absolute train wreck. And the phones were not lighting up for that.
Yeah, I bet.
In fact, they were hanging up on it because it was not good. And then they switched back, but so they went to California, and then they made a big move to Madison. So they do some pretty big competitions, or the stadium is amazing. They do an outside thing, they do an inside thing with the stadium. It's really fun to watch the weightlifting under the lights in the stadium. It's super cool. I mean, it's really, really fun. So this year, I think it's the very beginning of August, and they've already, if you're listening to this, they've already released a bunch of the workouts, but the first couple ones, they're doing a 1 rep max snatch and a 1 rep max clean and jerk, which are super fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so if you're not, so here's the argument. People will be like, oh, that person lifted a lot of weight, but an Olympic weightlifter lifts twice as much as that person, which is fair.
That's fair.
Right?
But
the thing is that, okay, that person also can run a 5-minute mile.
Right.
And do X amount of pull-ups unbroken. And I think what you were saying before is probably right, is that, when you see these guys, they're basically physical specimens.
Yeah, they're well-rounded athletes.
They're very well-rounded in the sport of CrossFit.
Right.
A lot of them. So I think there's a weird thing that happened where, like, people were just athletes and they were picking this stuff up. Because they always have a weird object or something different, or a sprint, or they have some kind of test that's weird to people. And the people that typically thrive are the ones that are athletic.
Right.
Because there are people that are good at CrossFit, meaning they can do certain CrossFit movements really well and they know how to pace those things, but they're not athletic in terms of like, oh, I'll pick this up and I'll be able to figure this out on the fly. Like a good example would be Laura. She's more athletic than me. So if you gave us a new skill that neither of us knew before, she will figure it out before me and beat me in it. So like the one year they threw a baseball as far as they could. And that's what I think the weird thing is because you have people that get good at only CrossFit, but I like it more when they throw some of that weird stuff in there just to keep everybody honest.
Right.
Like, are you actually an athlete? Like, are you just like, have you just been only, okay, I'm going to go into the gym and I'm going to do my strength and I'll do these things that I think are going to come up at the games. And then
it should involve agility and all those other
like,
sorts of things. Body awareness.
Yeah. Like, throwing a baseball is a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, the sprint is a great idea. And those are things that like kind of change it up a little bit, and they they keep everybody honest. Like they throw a new implement in there, and the people that can adapt the quickest win, and the people that don't, you pay the price for not being adaptable. Which I think CrossFit really ultimately, the goal of it is to be adaptable.
Well, I mean, it's about functional fitness.
Yeah.
And so that's of the same kind. That adaptability is functional fitness.
Right. So like if you fell down as an older person, you have
Thanks.
to. You're welcome. I didn't want to say you. I did say
Yeah, you did say.
I was actually I was doing something. I was climbing up on a ladder I was on a ladder, and Mabry was helping me do something, and I was like, a fall from this height at my age could be devastating.
You see me get down on the ground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but there really is, truthfully, like when people tell me they can't do a burpee, like if they're like, I need to scale this burpee to something else, I'm like, you need to definitely never say that again, because it's getting to the ground and getting up, which is a skill that you need to have as you get older, for sure.
Yeah.
Getting down is probably the easy part, but getting up is the trick, making sure you can get up. So do you follow the games at all? Or do you even know who?
Vicariously. If you guys will talk about it, and I might check on something after you guys discussed it, but usually I've got other things going on.
Yeah, so basically the girl that's been dominating.
Oh, Tia.
Yeah. She just had a baby. So she's not competing this year, so there's some excitement about
who's next.
Who's gonna win, and then until she comes back, because she was like doing like a really hard CrossFit workout. I saw her post online, like, a few. I mean, it's not that many. She had the baby after me and Laura had the baby, so she's definitely not 4 months postpartum, and she's already doing like these crazy workouts. But I guess, I mean, hey, whatever. And then the guys. There was like that guy from Russia that couldn't get over here for like all those years, Roman Kronikov, and then he finally came over, and I think he's going to be a big deal. Justin Medeiros won. He's won the past 2 years. 2 years. So whenever Matt Frazier retired, he then started winning the past two. So I think it's probably his third year. So there's some excitement in there. Rich Froning retired. Yeah. So he's not doing the teams anymore, and they won like 7 or 6 out of the last 7 years. Uh-huh. So there's like some excitement of what's going to happen there.
How big are the teams?
They're teams of 4. Okay. They used to be teams of 6, but 4 is a little easier to digest because there's a lot of moving parts with 6. But they would do they would do a worm, like the worm sandbag with 6 people. Could you imagine doing it with 6 people?
No, I mean, it's just too crowded.
It's too crowded. But they had a long one. They had a long one, and they've shrunk it down for the 4 people teams, but it screws people up pretty good. So
I'll describe what the worm is in case we have any of our viewers that have no idea what we're talking about. So it's a long, heavy sandbag, and they have 100-pound worms. They have 150-pound worms, and as you can imagine, a big long sandbag, it's cumbersome to lift up, so it does require a certain amount of teamwork, and it's you've got to have some good grip strength or clinching strength.
Yep.
It's cumbersome.
Yeah, and anything that's not like a barbell, like inherently rigid, when you go to pick it up or move it, especially when you're working with other people, it is so much more taxing.
Oh yeah,
because it's not like you don't have as much control over it as you do like anything that's like really like rigid or stiff that you can manipulate.
And it's easier to overcompensate on areas that don't necessarily need that strength,
right?
Because you don't know where it's going next.
That's right.
So you overexert yourself without a doubt because it's different every time.
Yeah, because you have no idea. Yeah, that's right. So and they do a lot of that stuff in the games now. They do like weird sandbag stuff. Even individuals, they do the Husafel stones, but they did them in sandbags. You ever seen those?
Yes.
They look it's like a weird triangle.
Right.
And then they wrap their hands around and they carry it. Like that kind of stuff is fun. Because I guess I like when these guys get devastated. Is really when somebody's like crying on the sidewalk because they couldn't make it. That's like really That's really what I'm here for.
Differentiator.
Yeah, because you can see who's been doing like weird stuff and who's not been doing weird stuff. Like I'll give Mabry's a perfect example. He went to that competition in Texas. After I hurt my back one year, I was supposed to do a competition.
I remember
in
that.
Texas,
Yeah.
And he went and stood in for me. Well, the team's lucky he did, because they did some weird stuff. And Mabry's like super athletic.
Yeah.
So there's a video floating around somewhere where they had to do double 70-pound kettlebell squat cleans. For those of you that are listening, kettlebell start in the ground, and you have to somehow...
And they're 70 pounds each.
70 pounds each, so 140 pounds total. Somehow get them onto your shoulder and pass through a squat all basically at the same time.
Yeah, that's in his wheelhouse for sure.
So everybody else looks like they are dying.
Yeah.
Like can't do them. They're doing one at a time, putting them down. And then Mabry walks up to him and he's never done them before. He's not practiced them. He
Right.
may have practiced them before, like in the behind a little bit. But then he just starts going touch and go. Like he doesn't break. He just keeps going and he crushes through them. And that's what I like. That makes me feel like it's a sport. Like you have like athletes that are just like good at everything.
Yeah.
Which like I think like when you hear guys that play baseball, like he got drafted MLB and he got drafted in the NFL. Like they're just true athletes. That's what what I like. I like when you see those guys that are like, this guy can do just about anything.
Yeah.
Which is a big fear to people in the CrossFit community, or if it's not, it should be. I've heard some people talk about it, but that if a guy that didn't make it in the NFL or maybe getting close to retirement, which is still a young man,
Yeah.
like retirement age in the NFL could be
At 28 to 32.
32 years old.
Yeah.
That they're such a higher level of athlete that they could just be like, I'm just going to go do CrossFit.
Yeah.
And they already Olympic weightlift. The strength base, the hardest thing to get is strength.
Right.
So they already have that bias. Now you're just building conditioning.
Yeah, and the skills unique to CrossFit, like butterflies.
Yes. And they'll be able to pick that stuff up because of their athleticism.
Right.
So the fear is that these dudes will be like, maybe I'll just do that for funsies. It doesn't mean that they're a win. It definitely doesn't mean that they're just going to win.
But they're going to be a factor.
But they're going to be a problem for some people that want to make it to the games and maybe get kicked out by, like there was a guy named, I think his name was Marquand Jones. He made it. He's been doing CrossFit for like a little bit, and he made it to semifinals.
Yeah.
And so what that means is he kicked them out. Okay, so anyway, there is inherently an issue if these super athletes decide that they're just going to like, jump in and start doing it. But that doesn't mean it. I mean, I think the sport's going to grow. I think the key, which is happening now, the sport grows when younger kids start doing it. So you see these kids that are starting to turn 18, 19.
Right.
They've been doing it their whole lives. They're also very athletic. They're not just, picked it up later in life. So they'll be able to compete with those guys that are.
Yeah, and their form is just phenomenal.
Perfect.
Watching these youngsters get underneath a barbell, they can do things that I can't with arguably more weight in some cases.
Yep, that's right. And like you can see that the form is perfect, and that will carry them like to be able to compete with those guys that just kind of pick up the sport just because they're super athletes, maybe from a different sport.
Right.
They'll be able to compete with those guys. So, so I mean, I'm excited about it. It'll be a fun 3 days. I do enjoy watching it. We typically skip through the slower heats and go right to the heavy hitters, but it is a fun weekend. If you're a listener and you don't do CrossFit and you've thought about it, don't watch the games and think that's what we do.
Yeah.
Because we sure don't. I hear people say that all the time. They're like, is that what you guys do? We're like, a version, but it's not that.
Yeah.
That is like, that's like grabbing a football and being afraid that you're going to be thrown into an NFL game. That's not what it is. What we do is more for physical fitness, and camaraderie. It's not like that. That's a more competition, but you should do yourself a favor and go check out local competitions, because if you start doing it and check out the local competitions, you'll have a better idea what's going on in the games.
Right.
So I thought it would be a good idea to kind of just talk a little bit about the games with it coming up, and just kind of go over a couple of things and some of my pet peeves with it and some of the things that I think are going to make it in the future. So
Can I add one thing real quick to that testimonial?
I would love for you to.
So there are a lot of folks that might be listening and say, I don't know if that just seems excessive, or you're going to injure yourself. I hear a lot of injury. When I tell people I do CrossFit, I usually don't broadcast it a whole lot, but I go to the gym a lot. What do? I go to a CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
Aren't you worried that you're going to injure yourself as one? And that's you can injure yourself doing anything.
For sure.
And the older you get, and the less you use your body in an athletic fashion or stay mobile, I'll say it that.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get injured. Like I used to have back issues galore.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was from flying and not being as physically fit as I should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing about CrossFit is so well-rounded that like the whole core gets exercised if you do it right with good coaching. And we have great coaching at this gym.
Right.
To where it's a non-issue anymore.
That's right.
And the other thing is a lot of folks will like, you guys aren't even doing pull-ups because they see the guys doing butterfly pull-ups. This is not even really pull-ups. Like, well, you don't know what the rest of us do to get to that point where you can do butterfly pull-ups.
Correct.
Or kipping pull-ups or whatever.
Right.
And it's not really, we're not doing a pull-up because it's a different muscle group if you're doing strict pull-ups.
Right.
But that's not the point of the kipping or butterfly pull-up.
Correct. It's
completely different exercise.
It's to get more volume in a movement, in a gymnastics movement. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily, you're not really building strength at a certain thing in that, which people still do. So
it's a shoulder mobility and a cardio.
yeah, 100%.
Like it wears you out. But,
Yeah, I think those are good things to say. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
but definitely check out a local gym
Yep.
and give it a try, because if you're looking for something to do and if you got some disposable income,
yeah, it's a good way to spend your money.
it is. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's
and
a lot of fun.
And they have energy drinks at the front, and that's a good use of your money too.
And some gyms, if you're lucky, they have a podcast associated, and you could be slightly famous.
Only the very select, very exciting few.
The elite gym.
The elite gyms have a podcast, and possibly a studio, just a general studio attached to it. So, well, this was fun. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good thing with the games coming up. So
It was good.
we'll do something fun with maybe a question with a post for it to think who's gonna win the CrossFit Games, or what do you think? So we'll come up with something cool. Again, don't forget about Charlie Mike Never Weekend. We appreciate you, the listeners, and for tuning in every week. We really appreciate you guys, and don't forget, stay fresh, cheese bags.
Stay fresh.